Run your tongue across your back teeth right now. Feel that ridge, that groove, maybe a filling from 3 years ago, maybe a spot that twinges when cold water hits it. You brushed this morning. You probably brushed last night too. And somewhere in a drawer, you've got floss, mouthwash, maybe a whitening kit you bought and used twice. Your mouth is the most maintained part of your entire body. And yet, statistically, by the time you're 30, something in there has already decayed, been drilled, or been pulled. Now here's the part that should bother you. Dig up a skeleton from 10,000 years ago, before toothbrushes, before floss, before a single tube of toothpaste existed anywhere on Earth, and in a huge number of cases, the teeth are still there. Full set, worn down flat like sanded stone from a lifetime of chewing, but no cavities, no decay, no root canals. A hunter-gatherer who never once cleaned his mouth in his entire life is walking around, biologically speaking, with a healthier bite than you have right now, after decades of brushing twice a day. That's not supposed to make sense. We've been told for our whole lives that brushing is what saves your teeth, that decay is just an inevitable tax on being human, something you fight against with enough discipline and enough fluoride. But if that were the whole story, ancient people should have had the worst teeth in human history. Instead, in study after study of pre-agricultural skeletons, dental researchers keep finding the opposite. Something else was protecting them. Something we walked away from without even noticing. Stretch that out for a second, because the scale of it is almost hard to hold in your head. Homo sapiens has existed for roughly 300,000 years. For the overwhelming majority of that time, nobody brushed anything. No bristles, no mint paste, no dentist appointment twice a year. And yet the fossil record shows populations living entire lifespans, 60, 70 years in some documented cases, with intact, cavity-free teeth. Then agriculture shows up, roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago, a blink in evolutionary time, and dental disease explodes almost overnight in the skeletal record. This isn't a story about hygiene. This is a story about what changed in the human mouth right around the time we started farming. And almost nobody connects those two dots when they're sitting in a dentist's chair getting a cavity filled. So the real question isn't, why do modern people get cavities? The real question is, what were ancient humans doing right, without trying, without knowing it, that we've completely lost? And it turns out, there isn't just one answer. There are at least 4 separate things working together in the ancient mouth. 4 mechanisms that quietly vanished one by one as human life modernized, and each one you lose makes the next one matter even more. The first piece is the simplest, and it's the one people get the most wrong. Ancient diets weren't sugar-free because ancient people had willpower. They were sugar-free because sugar, in the concentrated form you eat it today, basically didn't exist. A hunter-gatherer might get a burst of natural sugar from wild honey or ripe fruit a few times a year. Seasonal, rare, gone in days. Compare that to a modern human who can get more concentrated sugar in one soda than an entire ancient community saw in a month. And here's the mechanism that matters. The bacteria in your mouth, specifically strains like Streptococcus mutans, feed on sugar and produce acid as waste. That acid eats into enamel. Without a steady sugar supply, those bacteria simply had far less fuel to work with. Less fuel, less acid, less erosion. It's not that ancient mouths had no bacteria. It's that they were starving the wrong ones out. But that alone doesn't explain everything, because plenty of ancient diets weren't sugar-free at all. Some populations that relied heavily on wild carbohydrates still show remarkably low cavity rates, which means sugar avoidance can't be the whole engine here. Something else had to be compensating, something built into the mechanics of eating itself. And that leads into the second piece, the one that sounds almost too simple to matter. They were chewing brutally hard. Ancient diets weren't soft. There was no smoothie, no white bread, no pre-mashed anything. Meat had to be torn off bone. Roots and tubers were fibrous and dense. Nuts had to be cracked and ground down with molars alone. Anthropologists studying ancient jawbones consistently find they were wider and more robust than modern human jaws, with more room for teeth to come in straight, which is part of why impacted wisdom teeth were far less common. But there's a second effect that's easy to miss. All that hard chewing physically scraped the tooth surface clean, meal after meal, for an entire lifetime. Every bite was, in a very real sense, a scrubbing. Here's where it gets uncomfortable though, because you'd think softer modern food would just mean less scrubbing, a minor downgrade. That's not what happened. Soft, processed food didn't just remove the scraping action, it also sits on the tooth surface longer and breaks down into sugars faster, which means modern mouths lost the mechanical cleaning at the exact same moment they gained more of the bacterial fuel that causes decay in the first place. Two protective systems collapsed together, and it happened so gradually across generations that nobody noticed the mouth quietly losing its natural defense. That collapse alone should have been the end of the story, decay just marching in unopposed. But ancient people had a third layer working underneath all of it, something happening at the level of the saliva itself. And this is the part almost nobody expects to hear. Saliva isn't just there to help you swallow. It's loaded with calcium and phosphate, and it constantly works to redeposit minerals back into tiny weak spots on your enamel before they can turn into actual holes. It's a repair system, running quietly, every hour, every day, whether you think about it or not. And what triggers saliva production most strongly isn't brushing, it's chewing. The harder and longer you chew tough, fibrous food, the more saliva you produce, which means ancient people, simply by eating their normal daily meals, were constantly remineralizing their own teeth in real time. Modern soft diets require far less chewing, which means less saliva, which means the repair system that used to run automatically in the background barely gets switched on anymore. So now you've got three systems working together in the ancient mouth. Low sugar, limiting the bad bacteria, hard chewing, scraping the surface clean, and saliva rebuilding enamel faster than it could break down. Stack those together and cavities become genuinely rare, not because of some ancient secret ritual, but because the entire feedback loop of eating itself was doing preventive dentistry, meal after meal, for free. But there's a twist buried in this that flips the whole modern assumption on its head, and it's the part that should really sit with you. We assume ancient people, without dentists, without tools, must have suffered constant, brutal tooth pain. That agony was just a fact of prehistoric life, and yet the skeletal evidence tells a stranger story. Their teeth weren't perfect. They were often worn down flat, sometimes to painful degrees by old age, and abscesses did happen. But actual cavities, the specific rot caused by sugar-feeding bacteria, were shockingly rare compared to what shows up in skeletons right after agriculture takes hold. Communities that shifted to grain-heavy diets show a spike in dental disease so sharp that archaeologists can practically date the switch to farming just by looking at people's teeth. The invention that we think of as human progress, stable food, surplus grain, the birth of civilization, was, for the human mouth, a quiet disaster. And this is where the story turns personal, because you didn't choose any of this. Nobody handed you a decision between hunter-gatherer teeth and modern teeth. You were born into a food environment already saturated with soft carbohydrates and constant sugar, already stripped of the hard chewing that used to trigger your own saliva's repair system. Brushing was invented, in large part, as damage control for a problem agriculture created in the first place. You're not failing at dental hygiene. You're compensating, with a toothbrush, for the loss of three ancient systems that used to run automatically, for free, every time you took a bite of food. Which brings us to the piece almost nobody talks about, the twist hiding underneath the whole explanation. It's not really about ancient humans having better teeth than us. It's that your mouth, right now, still contains all three of those old systems. Your saliva still has the same mineral repair chemistry your ancestors' saliva had. Your jaw still responds to chewing resistance. Your oral bacteria still shift in response to what you feed them. Nothing about your biology broke. What changed is the input. Your body is still running ancient software, waiting for ancient conditions that mostly disappeared. The toothbrush in your bathroom isn't a sign of progress over your ancestors. It's a patch, applied daily, for a wound that opened the moment human food stopped requiring a jaw. So the next time you catch yourself running your tongue over a filling, or wincing at cold water on a sensitive tooth, understand what you're actually feeling. You're not feeling a flaw in the human body. You're feeling the echo of a trade humanity made 10,000 years ago, when we chose stored grain over scattered roots, softness over resistance, convenience over the slow, quiet maintenance that used to happen without anyone lifting a brush. Your ancestors didn't have better mouths. They just still had the conditions your mouth was built for.